Dear friends, what happens when a teacher's attempt to humiliate a student becomes the very moment that changes everything? In today's story, a gifted black student faces public mockery from his biased music teacher, but what follows leaves everyone speechless. Will justice prevail when hidden talents are finally revealed? This powerful story of prejudice, courage, and redemption may just change how you see the world around you. If you're watching or listening to this story for the first time, I humbly invite you to tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel and press the bell icon so you won't miss any of my upcoming stories that I publish daily. Thank you. And now let's dive into the full story. Part 1. The first day. Elijah Carter held his class schedule in one hand, his fingers gripping the paper tightly as he made his way through the unfamiliar corridors of Maple Ridge High School. Third period advanced music with Mr. Gregory Sanford, room 214. It was only his first day here, and already he was counting the minutes until the final bell. 5 schools in 3 years. His dad's work with a traveling gospel choir meant they were always moving. New faces, new hallways, new teachers. It never got easier. The bell rang just as Elijah slipped through the doorway of room 214. 25 pairs of eyes turned to look at him. "You must be our new addition," came a smooth but cold voice. Mr. Sanford stood tall at the front of the class, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed back. His dark suit was pressed to perfection. The way his wire-rimmed glasses gleamed as he looked over them gave Elijah a chill. Mr. Sanford's polite smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "We've already assigned seats according to vocal range," he said, giving a faint nod toward the semicircle of students. "You'll have to wait until I evaluate you." Elijah gave a quick nod and moved toward the empty chair at the back of the room. "Not there, Mr. Sanford snapped. "That seat is for the chorus section. You'll stand at the front until I determine where you belong." A few students chuckled quietly. Elijah caught sight of a girl in the second row with dark braids and sharp, bright eyes. She turned to glare at the ones laughing before glancing at Elijah and giving him a small, encouraging smile. "As I was saying before we were interrupted, Mr. Sanford continued, his voice cool and deliberate. "Our winter showcase is only 6 weeks away. Only students who demonstrate proper classical technique will be featured soloists." He let his gaze linger on a few students dressed in pressed shirts and khakis before his eyes slid past Elijah without acknowledgement. For the next 40 minutes, Elijah stood silently while Mr. Sanford led the group through scales and arpeggios. Despite the stiffness in his legs, Elijah's foot tapped softly to the rhythm, something his father had told him to always do. Feel the pulse. Let the music live in you. Suddenly, Mr. Sanford's voice sliced through the room. "Mr. Carter, am I boring you?" Elijah froze. "No, sir." "Then perhaps you could keep your fidgeting under control," Mr. Sanford said. "This is a music class, not a dance hall." A boy in a varsity jacket snorted. "Maybe he's more into rap than real music, Mr. S." "That's enough, Trent, Mr. Sanford said, though there was a faint trace of amusement tugging at his mouth. "Though I will say this class focuses on the classics, not contemporary alternatives." The girl with braids raised her hand. "Mr. Sanford, weren't spirituals the foundation of most American music? We learned about that last year in history." "Thank you for your insight, Maya," Mr. Sanford said coldly. "But this isn't a history class." Then he turned back to Elijah. "Let's have you demonstrate your vocal range." Elijah swallowed. "I haven't warmed up. Neither have most performers when opportunity strikes," Mr. Sanford replied. "Sing the scale." Now, Elijah started softly, his voice barely audible. "Projection, Mr. Carter, Mr. Sanford barked. "We can't hear you in the cheap seats." Elijah's face burned. He tried again, but hit a wrong note halfway up the scale. Mr. Sanford sighed loudly. "Well," the teacher said with exaggerated disappointment, "I suppose you'll be in the back row of the baritone section. Try not to throw the others off." He made a note in his grade book. "And please, come prepared tomorrow. This isn't a remedial class. As the bell rang, Elijah grabbed his bag and hurried toward the door. "Hey, new kid," a voice called. It was Maya. "Don't let him get to you," she said. "Sanford's like that with anyone who's not in his precious chamber choir." "Thanks," Elijah mumbled. "Seriously," she continued, falling in a step beside him. "He once made a girl cry because she couldn't sight-read a piece he wrote himself." "What's your next class?" she asked. "English," Elijah said, "with MS. Turner." "Same here. I'll show you where it is." As they walked down the hall, Trent and his crew passed by. "Yo, Sanford got a new charity case," one of them said. Maya rolled her eyes. "Ignore them," she muttered. "They think being in chamber choir makes them music royalty." Elijah said nothing, hearing his father's voice in his head. "Keep your head down, son. Your music will speak when the time is right." He just wasn't sure if that time would ever come at Maple Ridge. Part 2. Finding his voice. That evening, Elijah sat at the battered upright piano in their tiny apartment. His fingers hovered above the keys. No messages from his dad. Aaron Carter had been on tour for 3 months now, backing one of the biggest gospel artists in the country. "You gonna play, or just stare at it?" asked his sister, Layla, plopping down beside him. Elijah smiled faintly. Then he launched into a jazz progression, his fingers dancing over the keys. The familiar rhythms melted the tension from his shoulders. "I like it when you play," Layla said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "It makes me think of Dad." "Me too," Elijah replied quietly. Their father had left the piano for them before he hit the road again. "So you don't lose your touch," he'd said. What Aaron didn't know was that Elijah had been composing his own pieces for years, melodies he'd never shared with anyone. "How was school?" Layla asked. "Same as always." "That bad, huh?" "The music teacher's a piece of work," Elijah replied, playing a slow, mournful tune. "Thinks he knows what's worth listening to." He thought back to Millstone High last year, when he'd finally built up the courage to audition for jazz band. The director had been impressed. Some of the students? Not so much. The bullying had started within days. "Dad says people who don't get your music just haven't learned how to listen," Layla offered. "Yeah," Elijah sighed. "Well, Dad's not here, is he?"